I was lying in a hospital bed with 11 stitches in my skull when my only son hung up on me. Let me say that again slower, because it took me 3 days to believe it to myself. I had just survived a car accident that could have killed me. 2 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, blood still drying in my hair. And when the nurse asked me who to call, I did not even hesitate. I gave her my son's number, because that is what fathers do. That is what you do when the world goes sideways. You call your kid. And my kid looked at his phone, saw it was about his father lying in a hospital, and said 4 words that rearranged everything I thought I knew about the last 16 years of my life. Is he dying? And when the answer was no, he hung up. What I did after that is the reason you clicked on this video. What I did next, Kevin never saw coming. Not on day 1, not on day 5, not even when he was standing on my front porch begging me to open the door. But before I tell you what I did, I need you to understand something. This is not a story about revenge, not really. This is a story about a man who spent 16 years building a life around another person, and what happened the day he found out exactly what that person had been building around him. Stay with me, because the ending of this story is not what you think it is. If this is your first time here, take a second and hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like this one come every single week, and the comment section on the last one was on fire. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from tonight. I read every single one. Have lived in Portland for 22 years, same house, same neighborhood, Selwood, quiet streets, old craftsman homes, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave from their porches in the mailman. Knows your dog's name, just Kevin and me. I raised my son from the time he was 14 years old after his mother Martha and I divorced. He is 30 now. Those 16 years were not easy, I want to be honest about that. There were years where I worked double projects just to keep the lights on, and his tuition-paid years where I skipped things I wanted. Trips I never took, repairs on my own truck. Kept deferring because Kevin came first. Always Kevin first. I do not say that looking for applause. I say it because I need you to understand what I was standing on when all of this happened. Because a fall only means something when you know the height. I paid his college tuition at the University of Washington, up in Seattle. Every semester, every dollar. I made sure he never had to drop out, never had to scramble, never had to feel one single moment of financial panic. I handled everything. That is what fathers do. Or at least that is what I thought fathers did. We will come back to that later, because that sentence, that is what fathers do, turns out it can be the most dangerous sentence a man ever believes. Kevin moved back to Portland after graduation. Met a woman named Brittany at some rooftop event. Downtown, married her 3 years later. Nice wedding. I paid for a significant portion of it and did not complain once. Not once. They settled in the Pearl District. One of those sleek condos with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the exposed ductwork that apparently counts as interior design now. Good for them. I was happy for them. Or at least I told myself I was. And here is where I need you to lean in a little closer, because everything I just told you, every sacrifice, every check, every silent deferral of my own life, it was all sitting in a row like dominoes, and on one completely ordinary Friday afternoon in late spring, somebody pushed the first one over. I want you to picture a completely ordinary Friday, the kind of day where nothing feels like it is about to go wrong. The sky was doing that pale Oregon blue thing it does right before summer commits. I had the windows down. I was thinking about nothing more complicated than whether I was going to grill that weekend. I was driving back from a hardware store out on Powell Boulevard when a delivery truck ran a red light at an intersection 3 blocks from the Springwater Corridor Trail and hit the passenger side of my truck. The impact spun me into a parked car. The world went white, then very quiet, then very loud with sirens. I remember the sound. And I need you to know that sound is nothing like the movies make crashes sound like. Percussion. This sounded like the world tearing a single sheet of metal and glass, and physics deciding you do not get a vote today. Then the airbag white suffocating. Then nothing, and then fluorescent lights. And a woman in scrubs leaning over me, saying my name in that calm, measured voice that medical people use when they are trying not to alarm you. And somehow it is more alarming than anything else they could possibly do. Can you hear me? You were in an accident. You are safe. The paramedics got me to OHSU, Oregon Health and Science University. It sits up on Marquam Hill, like it is watching over the whole city. I was conscious the entire time, which I was told was a good sign. 2 cracked ribs on my right side. A fractured left wrist from bracing against the steering wheel. 11 stitches across the left side of my head where it connected with the window. They admitted me for observation. Concussion protocol now. Here is the part I need you to really sit with. I was conscious enough, barely, but enough, that when the intake nurse leaned close and asked if there was anyone they should call, I did not hesitate. Not 1 second. I gave them Kevin's number. Not my buddy Frank from down the street, who I have known for 20 years and who would have been in that waiting room before the nurse finished dialing my son. Because that is still what you do when you are lying on a hospital gurney with a fractured wrist and blood drying above your eye, and you are trying very hard not to panic. You call your kid. You want your kid. That is the thing about being a parent that nobody warns you about. It does not matter how old they get. It does not matter how old you get. When the ceiling lights are buzzing and strangers are cutting your shirt off, you want your kid. A nurse named Debbie, a no-nonsense woman from Gresham who had clearly seen every variety of human drama this city had to offer, was the one who made the call. She told me later what happened, and I want you to hear it exactly the way she told me. She introduced herself, explained who she was and why she was calling, told him his father had been in a car accident and was currently admitted at OHSU. And Kevin said, "Is he dying?" Debbie told me she was caught off guard, and Debbie is not a woman who gets caught off guard. She told him no. His father was stable, but he was injured, and it would really help to have family present, and Kevin said, "Okay, so he is fine then. I have a vacation to catch. He will be all right," and he hung up. Now Debbie did not tell me any of this in that moment. She stood there holding the phone for a beat. Then she came into my room and very professionally told me she had reached my son and informed him of my condition. She protected me from it. For about 6 hours, Debbie the stranger protected me from my own son. So I lay there that first night, staring at the ceiling of that hospital room, and I waited, and I want to be honest with you about what that waiting felt like, because this is where the story gets quiet before it gets loud. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he was already at the airport and the call dropped. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe Brittany had some kind of emergency. Maybe Debbie got cut off before she could explain how serious it was. I gave him every benefit of the doubt a father could manufacture. And believe me, I was manufacturing them on an assembly line. Around 9 that evening, I called him myself. He picked up on the third ring, Dad, just like that, flat, like he had been waiting for this interruption, like I was a telemarketer who had caught him at a bad time. "Kevin, I am at OHSU. I was in a car accident this morning. They called you silence then." "Yeah, they did. You are stable though, right?" "That is what they said." "I have a fractured wrist, Kevin. 2 cracked ribs, 11 stitches." "Dad, that sounds rough." It really does. But Brittany and I are literally about to leave for the airport. We have had this trip planned for months. As you said yourself, you are stable. You are not in surgery. We'll be fine. And then I said 3 words, not sure I have ever said to my son as an adult. "Can you come? I need you to understand what it cost me to ask that I am not a man who asks. I fix, I provide." I handle that has been the architecture of my entire life. Asking my son to come to my hospital bed was the most vulnerable thing I had said out loud in 11 years. And I meant every word of it. There was a pause, and I heard Brittany's voice in the background. I could not make out the words, but I recognized the tone, that clipped, impatient tone she uses when she feels like Kevin is taking too long on something. And then my son said the sentence that ended the old version of my life. "Dad, I am sorry, I really am. But vacation comes first right now. Brittany's friends are all going to be there, and you said yourself you are stable. You will be fine. You are a tough guy." I did not say anything for a moment. I was 63 years old with cracked ribs and a bandaged head, and my son was pre-justifying a beach vacation. "I will check in when we land." He said, "Get some rest." "Okay." And I need you to understand, I have replayed this moment more times than I can count. He said, "Love you," with the exact same energy a person uses when they are hanging up with a cable company customer service rep. And he ended the call. I put the phone down on the hospital blanket. The room was quiet. The monitors beeped softly. Down the hall, somebody's television was playing a late-night talk show, and the audience was laughing at something. I looked at that ceiling for a long time. There is a specific kind of pain that has nothing to do with cracked ribs. It does not show up on any scan. No nurse can medicate it. It lives somewhere behind your sternum, and it just sits there. This cold, heavy, clarifying thing. And here is Strange part, it does not make you want to cry. It makes you very, very calm. I was very calm. And that is when I started thinking clearly. What I did not know yet was that while I was lying there being Kevin had already done something else, something I would not discover until I tried to call him the next morning. He had blocked my number, but we will get to that, because first I need to tell you about the 3 phone calls I made the day I got home, because those 3 calls are why you are still watching this video. I spent 3 days at OHSU, and in those 3 days something settled in me, like sediment at the bottom of a river, quiet, heavy, permanent. The day I got home, cast still on ribs, still sore. I had already made my decisions. Kevin was a stress point, a critical one, and I had been ignoring the data for years. I work in structural engineering, or I did before retirement. And let me tell you something about stress points. They do not announce themselves. They do not send warnings. They hold and hold and hold until one day the load shifts 1 degree and the whole thing comes down. That first day home, I called my bank. I have been with the same Portland branch for 19 years, and here is something I have not told you yet. I had been sending Kevin $6,000 every single month for the past 2 years. Now, before you say anything, yes, I know how that sounds, but understand the context. When Kevin and Brittany got married, Brittany pushed for an apartment that was significantly above what Kevin's salary as a mid-level marketing coordinator could sustain. Kevin came to me, said it was just temporary, just until they got on their feet. That was 2 years ago. And here is the detail that still stings. Kevin was still calling me the best dad in the world. Every time that transfer cleared, every single time, $6,000 worth of best dad in the world like clockwork. My personal banker is a steady, reliable man named Tom. I told him I needed to cancel a recurring. Transfer $6,000 monthly to Kevin Miller, effective immediately. Tom did not ask why. Tom has been in banking for 30 years, and he has heard every tone of voice a human being can use. Tom processed it. Done just like that, 23 seconds to undo 2 years of misplaced loyalty. I thanked him and hung up. The second call was to my attorney, Don Haley, 40 years in a state law office. Over on S.W. Morrison Street. Don looks like a man who has seen every version of family disappointment this city has ever produced, and has stopped being surprised by any of them. I told him I needed to update my will, my life insurance beneficiaries, and any other document in which my son's name appeared as a recipient of anything. Don was quiet for a moment, then he said, "How soon?" I said. "Have Sandra clear the calendar." Now hold that thought, because the third call was different. The third call was to a private nursing agency, a reputable one out of Lake Oswego. I made the arrangements, and a woman named Lucy showed up a few days later. She was practical, efficient, and made genuinely excellent coffee. And here is why that call matters. Kevin did not just lose a benefactor that week. He lost the role he never knew he was supposed to fill. When I got home from that hospital, it was not my son helping me up the stairs. It was a professional I was paying, because I finally understood that paying for care was the only kind I could count on. Sit with that for a second, because Kevin sure as hell was going to have to. I moved through those first days at home like a man with a project. And if you know anything about engineers, you know that is the most dangerous state we can be in. Let me walk you through the will changes, because I want you to understand the full scope of what Don and I restructured. Kevin had been listed as the sole beneficiary of my estate, the Selwood house, my investment accounts, my retirement funds, and a life insurance policy that would have paid out just over $800,000. $800,000. Every single line with his name on it was revised, every single one. And while I was doing that, while I was sitting in my quiet house in Selwood, rebuilding the legal architecture of my entire life, something was happening 2,000 miles south in Cabo San Lucas, something that was about to turn my silent calm into the loudest message I have ever sent in my life, and I did not have to lift a finger. 3 days into what I can only assume was a very scenic vacation, Kevin reached for his wallet at the resort's main restaurant dinner. Brittany's friends from college were there, 4 of them, plus husbands, plus one serious boyfriend. The table was long and loud and beautiful in that way. Resort tables are when everybody at them believes the money will always be there. The check came, and Kevin put his card down with the casual confidence of a man who has never once in 2 years worried about a card declining. Why would he? The card had never once in its life said no. It declined. He laughed, I am told, made a joke about the bank, tried another card, declined. Now I want you to picture this moment slowly, because I have pictured it many times. Server standing there, the friends going quiet in that polite, horrified way people do Brittany across the table, with an expression I genuinely cannot imagine and do not need to. The reason both cards declined is simple. Both were funded at their core by money I had been supplying, money that Kevin had apparently not been carefully managing in my absence. When the transfer stopped, the cushion vanished. What remained was a gap wide enough to be immediately, publicly, humiliatingly obvious. Brittany handled it with the composed grace of someone who very much did not handle it with composed grace. Kevin excused himself from the table, and I know exactly where he went. He went to call me, because that is the pattern, right? When things are good, Kevin does not need his father. When the card declines suddenly, the number he blocked 6 days ago needs to work again. He unblocked me, my phone rang, I did not answer. He tried from Brittany's phone. It went to my regular voicemail, I had already screened it. I did not call back, then a text came through from a number I did not recognize. Dad, something is wrong with the account. Can you call me? I read it. I set the phone down. There was a baseball game on. My ribs were healing ahead of schedule, according to my follow-up doctor at the clinic on Barber Boulevard. Lucy had made dinner, and the coffee was excellent. It was a good evening, but the texts were just getting started, and what arrived over the next 36 hours told me more about my son than the previous 30 years combined. The texts escalated with a speed and creativity that would have been impressive under different circumstances. First confusion, Dad, is everything okay with the account? Then polite inquiry. I am sure this is a bank error. Then less polite, Dad, please call me. Then the guilt stage, I know you are upset, but this is not fair. And then my personal favorite, the one I have saved. The one I will keep until the day I die. Brittany is really stressed right now, and you need to think about how your actions affect other people. I want to let that one breathe. My son, who had left me alone in a hospital bed with cracked ribs and a concussion to go sit on a beach, was now informing me from that same beach that I needed to consider how my actions were affecting other people's stress levels. I considered it thoroughly, and then I did absolutely nothing, because here is what people who have never dealt with quiet strategic accountability do not understand. The most powerful thing you can do when someone expects you to react is to simply not. Every unanswered call is a message. Every ignored text is a statement. I did not need to yell. I did not need to explain. The silence itself was doing all the work, and it was doing it far more effectively than any argument I could have had. Kevin needed to sit with what he had done, really sit with it, not get talked out of it, not rationalize it away in a 2-minute phone call where I vented, and he apologized halfway, and we both agreed to move on. I wanted him to have time. Enough time to truly understand the dimensions of what he had chosen. He had plenty, and the numbers tell the story better than I can. 79 missed calls. I know that sounds like a number from a movie, but when a man realizes his safety net just vanished, he does not stop dialing between Kevin's cell, Brittany's cell. A number I did not recognize that turned out to be the hotel landline, and 3 calls from what appeared to be a Portland number I later traced to Brittany's mother. 79 attempts to reach me across a 36-hour window. Voicemails, texts, and a direct message on Facebook from Brittany's account with the opening line. James, I know you probably think you are making a point, but I did not finish reading it. I want to be precise here. I was not being cruel. I was not sitting at home cackling. I was recovering, handling my affairs, taking slow walks along the Springwater corridor. Once the ribs allowed it. Ironic, I know, given that is near where the accident happened. But I have never been one to avoid a place just because something bad happened nearby. The trail in late spring is beautiful. The roses were starting in the gardens along the way. I had coffee every morning at a small place on Tacoma Street, 3 blocks from my house, run by a guy named Pete, who has been there 15 years and always has the game scores ready if you want them. My life, as it turned out, was pretty good. It had just been subsidizing someone else's at a cost I had never fully accounted for. Don Haley called me on a Thursday afternoon. All the documents were ready. I drove over to his office on Morrison Street, cast on my wrist, moving a little carefully because of the ribs, and I signed everything. New will, new beneficiary designations, new everything. Don slid the final folder across his desk and said, "You sure about all of this?" I said. "Don, I have never been more sure of anything since I poured the footings on the Hawthorne overpass expansion in 2009. He nodded like that was a completely normal answer I have always liked. Dawn, and then late that same week I found out the vacation was over. They cut the trip short, came home 4 days. Early 4 days out of what was supposed to be a 10-day trip, which means Kevin sat on that beach, surrounded by Brittany's friends and their presumably functioning credit cards for 3 more days. After the card incident, before they finally booked the flights home, I choose to believe those were not comfortable days, and I want you to hold on to this feeling right now. The calm, the order, the slow click of consequences arriving on schedule, because on the following Tuesday morning, at exactly 11:40 a silver Audi pulled up to the curb outside my house, and everything I had built in silence was about to be tested out loud. They did not call ahead, did not text. Just showed up Kevin's silver Audi pulling up to the curb outside my house at 11:40 on a Tuesday morning. I know the time, because I was sitting in the front room with coffee and the newspaper. Yes, the actual physical newspaper. I am 63, and I have earned the right. I watched them get out. Kevin was in the clothes of a man who had been traveling, jeans, a t-shirt slightly wrinkled. He looked tired, not vacation tired. The other kind. Brittany was in a sundress and large sunglasses, the kind of outfit that made complete sense 12 hours earlier in a Mexican resort town and made somewhat less sense on a mild Portland street. She looked like she was marshalling something. A speech maybe? A strategy. They came up the front walk. I set down my coffee. I need you to understand something about this moment. For 9 days I had been quiet. I had not raised my voice. I had not sent a single angry message. I had not called Kevin to explain what I had done or why I had done it. I had simply gone about the business of reorganizing my life and let the consequences arrive on their own schedule. And here they were, on my front porch. Ringing my doorbell, I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. Kevin looked at me, at the cast on my wrist, at the fading bruise along my temple, at the man his father actually was standing in his own doorway, and something moved across his face. Something complicated. I would like to say it was full genuine remorse, but honestly I am not qualified to diagnose what I saw. It was a lot of things at once. Brittany had already started talking before I even fully had the door open. James, I know there are some things that need to be addressed, and we too want. I looked at Kevin, and I said one sentence. Did you block this number? And then I closed the door. Not slammed, not dramatic, just closed. The soft, definitive click of a man who has nothing further to add. At this time I heard them on the porch, murmuring. Then Kevin knocked. I went back to my chair. He knocked again, called my name through the door. Said, "Dad, come on please." His voice had lost whatever vacation was left in it. He sounded like a kid. He sounded 20 years old in the worst possible way. I turned the newspaper page, and here is where I am going to ask something of you. Stay with me through this next part, because it is the hardest part of the whole story to tell. And it is the part where you will find out whether I am the hero of this video or the villain of someone else's. Because Kevin stood on that porch for 20 minutes. Heard all of it. Brittany's voice going from managed to frustrated, Kevin's going from pleading to quiet, and at one point I heard what might have been genuine crying. Not the strategic kind, not the kind designed to move a room, but the tired, cornered kind that comes when a person runs out of other options. I sat with that. I am his father. I am not a stone. Every part of me that had raised that boy from 14 years old, every part of me that had paid the tuition and skipped the trips and answered every call, that part of me was standing on the other side of that door in every way except physically. But I also remembered Debbie the nurse standing in that hallway having just been hung up on. I remembered 11 stitches and a hospital ceiling at 9 at night. I remembered vacation comes first, so I sat. Eventually I heard them leave, the car doors, the engine, the silence that followed. I did not open the door again that day. And I need to tell you the truth about that night, because that night was the first night I questioned everything, not my decision. My decision was load-bearing, and I knew it. But I questioned myself. I questioned whether quiet accountability and quiet cruelty share a wall, and whether I had accidentally walked through the wrong door. That question kept me up until 2 in the morning, and the answer came 3 days later. In the actual mail, handwritten 4 pages from Kevin, and what was in that letter changed the ending of this story. A handwritten letter, 4 pages. In an era where my son communicates almost exclusively in texts that start with the word so, 4 handwritten Pages told me a number of things about the sincerity of the effort. Before I even read a word, I read it twice, and here is what surprised me. He knew the allowance was gone and was not coming back. Knew that whatever inheritance he had been quietly planning his future around had been redirected. He knew all of it, and his letter spent almost no time on any of that. It spent most of its 4 pages. On the hospital, on the phone call, on the moment he hung up, and on one specific admission that he had known, even as he was doing it, that it was wrong. He wrote that when Debbie the nurse called, he was standing in his closet deciding which shirts to pack, and that some part of his brain registered the words car accident and hospital, and that he had made a decision in about 4 seconds, that the vacation was closer and I was far, and that stable meant somebody else's problem. 4 seconds. He wrote it down himself, 16 years of sacrifice on one side, 4 seconds of deliberation on the other. That part mattered. Not because it excused anything, but because it was the first honest thing he had said to me in years. Now what I did next might surprise you. I did not call him. I did not write back. Instead, I called Don Haley and had him draft a formal letter outlining what had changed and what, if anything, might be discussed in the future. Not a reconciliation, not a doorway back to the way things were, a set of conditions, a structure, the way you would approach any load-bearing assessment, clear terms documented, with defined parameters for what happens if those terms are or are not met, Don said. It was the most organized emotional response he had seen in 40 years of estate law. I told him that was the nicest thing anyone had said to me since the accident. And then I waited again, because here is what nobody tells you about consequences. They are not the end. They are the beginning. The door I closed on that porch was never meant to stay closed forever. It was meant to teach the person knocking that a door is a privilege, not a utility. What I did not know was whether Kevin understood that, or whether he was just standing in the wreckage of his direct deposit, feeling sorry for himself. The answer came on a Thursday evening, and it came alone. I am not telling you. We sat down over coffee a week later, and everything was resolved. I am not telling you. Brittany and I had a heart-to-heart, and she apologized, and I forgave everyone over a nice dinner in the Pearl District. This is real life. Real life does not resolve in one scene. What I am telling you is that Kevin came back alone without Brittany, without a strategy, and sat in my kitchen on a Thursday evening and talked to me for 3 hours. Really talked. Not managed the situation, not handled his father. Talked. He was honest about things I did not know, about the financial pressure he had been feeling, about the way he and Brittany had been using the monthly allowance as a crutch, about the version of himself he had been performing for her friends, a version that required money he did not earn, and a lifestyle he could not hold up. And then he said something I will never forget. He said, "Dad, somewhere along the way, you stopped being my father and started being my infrastructure." And the worst part is I let it happen, because infrastructure never complains. Infrastructure. I sat with that word for a long time after he left, because he was right. And here is the part of this story where I have to be honest in a way that might lose some of you. I am 63 years old, and honest enough to know that when you solve every problem for someone, you do not actually make them stronger. You make yourself feel needed. And there is a difference. I had been as responsible for some of this dynamic as Kevin had, not for him. Blocking my number, not for the vacation that is on him fully, and he knew it, but for the underlying pattern, for building a son who believed money was love and availability was weakness. I had a hand in that. I could admit it out loud to his face. We did not hug. We are not really huggers, the Miller men. But when he left that night, I walked him to the door, and he turned around on the front step and looked at me, at the cast, at the bruise that was almost gone by then, and he said, "I am sorry, Dad. For the real thing, I am sorry I did not come." I said, "I know," and I let him sit with the fact that I know is not the same as it is fine, because it is not fine, not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Forgiveness is not a light switch. It is more like repouring a foundation. You can do it, but you do not build on it. The same day, the 6,000 is still stopped. The will is still rewritten. The terms are still terms. And Kevin is learning for the first time in his adult life what his own salary actually buys. And that is where most stories like this would end. But this is not most stories, because the hardest part of this whole thing was never the money. It was never the door. It was never even the hospital. The hardest part was what came after, when the anger burned off and I was left alone in a quiet house with the one question I had been avoiding for 16 years. Who am I when I am not being somebody's Father, months later, Frank and I finally did the Highway 101 trip, the trip I had been deferring for years because something always came first, and that something was always named Kevin. We drove up through Cannon Beach, stopped at the Haystack Rock, overlooked, grabbed chowder at a little place in Seaside that Frank swore by and was not wrong about, kept going up to Astoria, spent 2 nights there. Walked partway across the Astoria-Megler Bridge one morning, far enough to feel the wind and see the river open up. Frank said it was the smartest dumb decision I had made all year. We stood on the banks of the Columbia River where it opens out toward the Pacific and watched cargo ships moving slow and quiet through the gray water. Frank is a good travel companion, does not need to fill silence, does not need to have a plan for every hour. We drove back down through Tillamook and made it home to Selwood by Sunday evening. And somewhere on that drive, somewhere between the coast and the city, with the window cracked and the radio low, I realized something that hit me harder than the accident ever did. I had not thought about Kevin or Brittany or any of it for nearly 2 full days, and I did not fall apart. That was the moment I knew I was going to be fine, really fine, not performing fine, actually fine. It was the best weekend I had had in years. I came home to a house that was mine, a life that was mine, a set of accounts that reflected my actual decisions, and a relationship with my son that, for the first time in 16 years, was built on something honest instead of something automatic. Kevin and I talk now, not often, not like before. We have dinner maybe once a month. He pays his half, sometimes he picks up the whole check, and I let him, because I finally understand that letting him is not weakness. It is the point. Brittany and I are civil. That is all I will say about that. Some foundations you inspect and walk away from, and here is the thing I keep coming back to, the part I think about. On those morning walks along the Springwater corridor, with the roses coming in and the trail quiet at 7 in the morning, my son needed to find out that his father was not a utility, not a direct deposit, not a safety net with a personality attached. He needed to find out that I was a man, a specific man, with a specific life, specific feelings, and a specific set of limits, and that when you blow past those limits without looking back, consequences do not call ahead. They just show up. But here is what I did not expect, the part that still gets me, if I am being honest with you right now. I needed to find out the same thing, because for 16 years I had been hiding behind being Kevin's father. It was easier than being James. It was easier to be needed than to be known. And the day my son hung up on me in that hospital, he did not just break the pattern. He set both of us free. I am James Miller. I live in Selwood. Life is good. Life is really quiet, and I am keeping it that way. Now listen. If the story hit you anywhere close to home, I need to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever had to close a door on someone you love to save yourself, or maybe you were the one standing on the porch? Tell me where you are watching from and tell me your story, because I read every single comment, and the community in this comment section is honestly the best part of this whole channel. If you are not subscribed yet, I am going to ask you directly, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because the next story I am telling involves a brother, a family business, and a betrayal that makes this one look like a polite disagreement. You do not want to miss it. Smash that like button if Kevin standing on that porch got to you, even a little. It costs you nothing, and it tells YouTube to put this story in front of someone who might need to hear it tonight. Maybe someone lying in their own quiet house, wondering if they are allowed to choose themselves. You are allowed. Share this with someone who needs it, and I will see you on the next one.